There's really currently no way for a platform like Coinbase to register as a securities exchange, a broker, or clearing agent. And I think that's why they've been like talking and begging the SEC to give them that like path to compliance.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of WagMe TV. We got a wild one today with the SEC this week declaring all-out war on crypto. We got back-to-back lawsuits with Binance and Coinbase this week, and essentially what they're doing here is they're drawing a false equivalence between these two companies. It's a calculated move, and it goes with their broader scheme of really a repeated pattern of deception and lying and confusion by the SEC. And we're here to give you the full rundown and why we think Coinbase is going to be just fine. So I'll throw it to Mata to give a little bit of a rundown, and then we'll get into it.
Awesome. Yeah. So on Monday, it started with an SEC lawsuit against Binance, as Soham mentioned, right? And so this lawsuit essentially alleges that the company violated U.S. security laws by selling and trading digital assets that are considered securities without registering with the SEC. Something that we've been talking about for a while, not necessarily anything specifically new. What's also interesting here is they're not just going after Binance, but they're also going after CZ as well, who is their CEO. So a little bit of fraud action that we'll get into in a little bit. But this morning, which was Tuesday, there was also a lawsuit that was brought against Coinbase. And so this lawsuit similarly alleges that the company operated as an unregistered broker since at least 2019. Which essentially means Coinbase allegedly failed to register with the SEC as a broker-dealer, which is a requirement for companies that offer securities to the public. So again, sound very similar, but what's the key difference? So Coinbase is essentially, they're accused of attempting to really run around security regulations, while Binance faces allegations beyond that, right? The Binance allegations are a little bit more serious, essentially alleging a criminal enterprise is how it's been deemed in the press. And so the Coinbase allegations don't allege any fraud or thievery like the Binance pieces do. So really, really long story short, the SEC is really saying, is Binance a shady operation? We're bringing a lawsuit against them. Whereas Coinbase is really getting sued as they're pushing unregulated securities or securities that are unregistered. So I want to, take a break there and just stop. I mean, I know I talked about how we've been talking about some of these pieces for a little bit. What do you all think? Is this a surprise to you? How do you all feel about it? What's your take?
I mean, I definitely wouldn't. I'd be lying if I was saying I wasn't surprised a little bit, but at the same time, it kind of makes sense as like over the last couple months, couple quarters, we've seen like the push for CBDCs across the world, especially in the United States. And, you've kind of seen the SEC and a lot of these other cryptos, XRP, namely too, kind of going to war with each other. And I think that there's a lot of competing interests around CBDCs, the existing crypto landscape, and what the SEC wants to do. So, I'm definitely a little bit surprised that they're coming after Coinbase, but at the same time, it's not totally unexpected, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you on that, Sia. I think the biggest thing around, the Coinbase case is that there's really currently no way for a platform like Coinbase to register as a securities exchange, a broker, or clearing agent. And I think that's why they've been like talking and begging the SEC to give them that like path to compliance. And so this is something that Coinbase has worked towards, but the SEC just has not been cooperative. Where when we look at the Binance allegations, this is stuff that you could almost compare to FTX. So it's crazy that, the SEC is using this move to try and compare the two, because we're obviously seeing Coinbase try to take a path to compliance where this one, or Binance, is complete fraud. So it's pretty ridiculous that they're doing this, and, completely unfair to Coinbase and really like what Coinbase is trying to build here in the US.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, from my perspective, I don't think that like the act itself is that surprising. What surprises me is just the disingenuous nature of kind of how they're approaching everything, which, I mean, like I kind of said earlier, like it's a pattern of repeated confusion, right? Like it's like they don't even want to provide any sort of guidance or clear path forward or any type of understanding for any companies involved on the US front. And that's really disappointing. I mean, you go back to, what they're accused of is basically skirting securities laws, but they are also IPO, like they were able to IPO and they're a public company, which had to be cleared by the SEC to begin with, right? So like, how does that make any sense where in 2021, where they IPO'd, they were seemingly all good. Now all of a sudden we're sitting here 2 years later and they're not. Like things like that really make no sense. And I think they make no sense on purpose, right? Like that's kind of like been their entire game plan, is to kind of just cause as much confusion as possible and try to get people to freak out. We think about the timing of these actions, right? Completely agree with Evan, where what Binance is being accused of is far, far more serious than what Coinbase is being accused of. But, the timing of this is all very suspicious, right? It's just one day after another, trying to make it seem like it's, to the casual, viewer or something like that, trying to make it seem like it's all coordinated or related or in some way, shape, or form the same thing. When in reality, it's just very, very far from that. So all of these things kind of combined just make me think that, not necessarily like surprised at what they did, but surprised at kind of the disingenuous nature of how they've approached the entire thing personally.
Well, and who does this hurt the most but the shareholders and the investors? Like these are the people that the SEC is like it's created to protect these people, and now you're seeing shareholders of Coinbase get hurt because of the inability for the SEC to be able to outline that path to compliance for Coinbase. And so it's pretty egregious, I think, what they're doing, and just completely unfair to the work that Coinbase has done thus far to even get to where they're at.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic points, right? I mean, I think it offers a lot of questions up from the disingenuous nature that Soham was bringing up, right? They haven't even, put a ruling down on this court case against Ripple. We know how long that's taken. Now we're adding suits for two of, the most popular exchanges, right? They were allowed to IPO. If they were operating as an unregistered security exchange, why was that allowed? What's the motivation of going back on that now? It just feels like it's an interesting timing, is really an interesting strategy for the SEC, tying Coinbase to Binance. Binance, which we will get into a little bit in another episode, they probably have some skeletons in the closet that go a little bit deeper than Coinbase. But at the end of the day, right, it feels like this is really kind of, I think, to summarize all of our points, it feels like it's an assault on crypto that has come about this week. You've had months of, United States government hostility. We've called it Operation Choke Point. It just feels like a really direct attack, right? Where the SEC, they're taking this rogue enforcement action with no really clear guidelines. And it seems like they just want to tear into, hurt, kill crypto a little bit more every day. And so it's interesting, right? Like right now it's isolated to these two different exchanges and potentially Ripple, right? I think it goes a little bit further than that, especially with some of the investors that, Evan, you were kind of, referring to, right? They finally started to talk about specific coins, specific organizations that they were deeming as securities. Did you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so I don't know if one of you guys has a list that we could pull up, but essentially the SEC outlined coins that Coinbase sells on their platform as essentially unregistered securities. And I think it was pretty interesting to, look at the coins that they selected for this, because they all seem to have, or at least most of them seem to have the same type of history, where instead of ICOing, they are actually coins that sold a lot of their coins to venture capitalists as seed funding. And so this was something, when you look at Solana, Cardano, the Sandbox, Axie Infinity, a few of these, if not most of them, sold coins to venture capitalists, and I think that was something that was targeted in this list, and a reason that the SEC went after them. So I thought that was a pretty interesting distinction, and one where maybe that's a common trend that could come up in the future when you start to look at more coins that might start to see this regulation enforced on them as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and like a couple notable ones that were left off the list. Of course, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple. Some of these big dogs that we talk about a lot, and that there have been a lot of argument in terms of, are they a commodity? Are they a security? Like, who should regulate them? Those sorts of things. So, a couple notable. I mean, obviously, big names here on the list of, tokens that they have deemed securities, but also pretty big notable ones that they left off the list as well. Just for folks to note there.
Yeah, no Algorand, because Gary Gensler shilled it. Just kidding. I love Algorand.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Garcia, what do you think?
No. I was going to say, I think just adding a little bit of color to the point that you made, Zoe, about the fact that they, Coinbase had to file to go public and the SEC had to review that. In this tweet, Brian Armstrong basically directly refutes what the SEC is calling them out for and saying that there is no path to come and register, and they've tried to do that. And like basically he's completely refuting what they're saying and calling them out for. And so it's going to be interesting to see if the SEC kind of directly combats what Brian Armstrong is basically laying out in the public and telling all the Coinbase folks and telling the world what the actual behind the scenes action is going on. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on this.
I mean, I love the intro and the outro of that tweet, right? Regarding the SEC complaint against us today, we're proud to represent the industry in court to finally get some clarity around crypto rules. Fucking awesome. We love that. Outro, we'll get the job done. In the meantime, let's all keep moving forward and building as an industry. America will get this right in the end, right? So it feels like we have a good person fighting this fight and a good organization fighting this fight, and we all need to back them, no matter what you think about Coinbase or which preferred exchange that you have. But it definitely feels a little bit better on that front than maybe it does on the Binance front.
100%. Couldn't have put it better myself. And for that reason, we all will be supporting Coinbase in this great endeavor, cheering them on, using their products as much as we can, because they're the only ones who are going to be able to fight this fight. So that's pretty much it for us. Tune in for the next episode. We're going to be covering all the ugly skeletons inside Binance's closet more in depth. And for that reason, we think Coinbase will make it. So don't freak out. And we'll see you next time here on WagMe TV. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe down below. Peace.